Pascal, if you want to just do a quick roundup for
Yes.
those who haven't been there, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, and put the chrono on, it's the 1 minute. Chiara Fano, thank you for being here. I'm Pascal from Venture Center, delighted to be supporting our locals, supporting locals for this second webinar in order to address challenges that are presented to us around COVID-19. Paulina, Valerie, and Tony reached out to our community at Venture Center of small business owners, and we'll be able to support this. This is their content, this is their show. So without further ado, I hand over to Paulina for her to introduce the host for today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Hi, I'm Paulina, for those who haven't met me yet. I have, as you might have seen, I have muted all of you guys. So feel free, like we mentioned before, this is also going live to our local supporting local Facebook group. So if you have any questions, try to put the questions into that group because I will be monitoring them. If you too complicated with 2 screens, feel free to put them into the chat here. The main reason why we want them to be in Facebook is so that when people later on are watching this video, they can see what questions have been asked as well. But I will introduce everyone right now. So we have Tony, our IT expert from Stratus Blue, who is downtown local Tauranga with us. We have Valerie from Emerald Business Consulting, who does all our geeky, as she calls it, geeky compliance work, which we need to touch base on. And then we have 2 special guests today. We have the beautiful Jade Green from Australia, who used to run for over a decade recruitment agencies and really focusing on employment and team building. And she also runs her own remote team for years now. And then we have the beautiful John, who I had the pleasure to meet today. He's like looking at himself, yes. John is also, he's American, we will forgive him, living in Tauranga, so it's absolutely fine. And he has been working with bigger businesses and also quite a bit of remote working with businesses like Microsoft, GE, and Amazon, which was this latest one. Now a consultant in his field here in Tauranga, working with national and international clients. So John, Jade, Tony, and Valerie, if you can unmute yourself, let's get straight started. The agenda for today is we're going to touch base on the relief package at the beginning as well as in the end. And in the middle, our main subject is around leadership, remote working, and so restructuring, if this is the field you're going to have to go down to, because some of us will have to. At the end, we will touch base on things like the mortgage holidays, the landlords versus tenants discussion, a little bit about compliance, because you know our taxes are still due, and an update from the IRD. So if you want to have specific questions around that kind of subjects, please stay on till the end. We're going to try to stick to the 60 minutes, but if it does extend a little bit, I'll let you know in advance. So Valerie, I'm going to come straight to you, our lovely compliance lady who loves everything geeky and in detail. Wage subsidy, can you give us a short update on what are the current questions which are being asked and maybe some answers to our questions?
Thank you, Paulina. First of all, hello everyone, and I would like to thank you for your time, much appreciated, and that's the best time for us to kind of come together and do our best for each other as well. So with the wage subsidy, going straight into the point, just to recap, so government introduced the wage subsidy scheme where employers can apply for wage subsidy. So if you recall, there was 2 different types. There was wage subsidy and leave subsidy, and leave subsidy was specific to people when they go on in the self-isolation. So that's been completely removed. And now we've got just one straight wage subsidy scheme. That's applicable to all employers who maintained their employees. Also, one of the important parts there that employer has to make sure that they still have people on payroll and they still endeavor to pay them at least 80% of their normal wage. And in that case, employer can apply for $585 per week, and they get lump sum, and they apply only once. And the latest news was on 27th of March, if you recall, and it was about government actually telling us, make sure you put your employee into the center of it. So the government subsidy of $585 or $350 per week for part-time employees has to be passed on to your employee. So we have to make sure that employer, yes, they receive the subsidy, but the money has to be passed on. And there was emphasis on that again and again. So make sure that you talk to your accountant if you're not clear. Make sure that you talk to your consultant or figure out how you're going to do it. But the main thing is this money is not to pay for electricity or product. This money is to be passed on to the employees. And of course, another thing, what RD is saying, just make sure that that amount is included into your normal payroll and normal tax rates apply. So that's kind of a short version of the latest development.
So a couple of questions we had already was things around what is the tax subsidy income? Is the income you receive, like that package, is that taxable? Yes or no?
It's not taxable to employer, but it's taxable to employee, because for employer it's money in and money out. But when it's returned in, when it's recorded and the somebody's payroll, they will be taxed as usual. So ultimately,
PAYE.
585 less, or maybe it's more, 585 less the tax and net amount, just like a normal payroll proceedings. But the difference here, so I think we covered that example before, where if you have to pay $600, you're only paying $15 out of your own pocket as an employer, but 585 went actually as a subsidy.
Perfect. And if you're looking at, say you've applied for this subsidy and you do have to let your staff go, what happens with that subsidy? Do you have to repay it?
Yes, so there is a development in that area where government is saying, okay, we understand that first week was a bit of a panic. So there is a link on workandincome.govt.nz where you can say that, yes, I have to repay something back. And there are different cases, and one of them is when you don't meet the criteria anymore. So one of them will be maybe that your business wasn't affected. You thought it will be affected, but remember, number one is your business has to be affected by at least 30%. The next one was where you have to still employ people, but if you don't employ anyone, if since then you decided that you have to actually let people go, then yes, you will go back and repay. And there is actually not an application of any sort. It's like an email address, and that's where you email and you say, you tell about your business and how much you received, and you say, actually, I think I went wrong there in the first week. I need to repay this money back.
Okay, cool. So I think it's really, really important to know right now that we can't use that money for rent or expenses or anything like this. It is really for employees. If you let your employees go, don't spend the money. The money will have to go back, right? Like it's not something we can play with to alleviate our pain, really. A couple of questions. What happens if you had wanted to employ a staff member and they started on the 1st of April? Can you still apply for that subsidy?
I can't see why not. We'll probably have to have a look a little bit more into, so if the business is still operating, so I would imagine the scenario, if we're employing someone on 1st of April, we still have work to do, right? So potentially, are we actually meeting the criteria there? Because you probably wouldn't employ anyone if your business doesn't operate right at the second. So I think it's probably case by case, but if, say, it's normal operations and you had to employ somebody on 1st of April, and if you meet all the criteria, which is legally operating in New Zealand, the person has to have working permit in New Zealand. The business has to be affected by at least 30% and have those people on books. If you meet those criteria, I can't see why not.
Perfect. And then there was another question just asked around the 80%. Is that based on an hourly rate or on how much work, how many hours you work? So can you pay someone 80% and reduce their hours to 80%, or is it you have to give them 100% hours at 80% of the value?
Yeah, so the legislation says that you have to look at 80% of their usual wage. So I would say that refers us to that dollar amount rather than 2 hours. And this also says that if it's too hard, so for example, you've got a person that worked part-time for you for the last 3 months, and for the previous period of time they worked full-time, you would probably go off the last 3 months. But if somebody is in a steady employment, you will go and look at their 12 months period. So on case by case, and I would say going back to what the law says, it says 80% of their wage,
Yes,
not hours.
perfect. So we're talking here sorry, the dollar amount, which brings us nicely to the next topic. And feel free, guys, to keep posting questions. We'll come back to questions in the end of this as well around it. But my statement to this would be, if you're employing your staff and you're paying them 80% of the salary, and there isn't a lot of work to be done, then you reduce the hours as well, so that they can be with their loved ones and that they can care for the people who are their bubble, right? Like, this is really where it goes. I'm gonna switch over now to John and Jade. I'll start with John. John, this has been tough times. I don't know, are you unmuted? I'm just looking.
I'm
Yes,
unmuted.
perfect. This has been some unprecedented tough times. And I mean, you're probably quite glad to be in the bubble in Tauranga rather than in somewhere America right now. But tell me, as a leader, because no one, human behavior, right? As leaders, we haven't seen something like this. What would you think would be your top tips around how to step up as a leader in these times guiding your team?
I think for me, it's probably 2 or 3 things that jump out. One is obviously take care of yourself. Make sure yourself and your family are sorted. I think it's hard as a leader, especially in times like this, to focus on lots of other things when you have those issues as well. I think the second thing is just act human. I think a lot of people worry that they can't be open and vulnerable during these times. And I think doing that's important. It builds a lot of trust. And I think it's just a reality of what we're in. And then the third thing I would tell people is, however you used to communicate to people, double, triple the amount of communication that you used to do, and I think that's the most important thing. I think right now in the first week, like from what I've seen and working with people, a lot of people were worried about adjusting to remote work, adjusting to what was happening. When we get to the third odd week, maybe the fourth week of lockdown, I think your ability to communicate proactively and regularly in these first couple of weeks will pay dividends for you there in the third and fourth week with your staff. So take care of yourself, be human, and you cannot communicate too much.
Absolutely. Communication is key. So I recommend, and John, you let me know what you think. Like, I have been communicating with my customers that, you should still show up every day. So even if it's like, send them an update every day, connect with them on a online Zoom huddle every day, because my theory or my stand on this is your customers, your team members are still on your payroll, right? So you should be communicating with them, but also you can expect from them that for them to show up for half an hour a day to have a communication with you, so you have an update on what's going on, right?
Yeah, and I think I agree. I think you want people to stay feeling connected to the business, because this will all end at some point. My daughter works for a local company, and they've set up a Snapchat channel. They obviously skew younger in terms of who they employ, but it keeps people connected every single day. Lots of people have done a lot of things that to show appreciation and success every day, especially if their businesses are moving forward. So totally would agree with that. It may feel a little artificial for people at times to do that, be a little bit different, right? Because you're doing it through a mode or a medium that you're not used to, especially if you're not used to working remotely and you're used to having everybody around you. Changing what you used to do in the morning to being online, it feels awkward in the beginning. At least that's for me, it was. And but you'll find that over time, if you stick with it, people appreciate it and it'll pay off. But I agree with you. Every single day, do something.
Awesome. Stay live with us right now, or like unmuted with us. Jade, I would like for you to jump into this conversation as well, because the other day we had a conversation around ideas what you can do with your team to keep them connected, and I would love for us to bounce around some of those ideas.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm here, and I just wanted to reiterate what John was saying. You can't pour from an empty cup. Right. And as a leader, you need to be really looking after yourself so that you can vibrate from an energy of positivity and not from an energy of scarcity or fear. So you need to get your energy right first so that you can lead from that place. But I've been saying all along, in this time of isolation, this is where we should have the most human connection. Right. And what you said before, Paulina, is we should be tripling down on the connection that we've been having. And this is the opportunity for us. This is what I teach with culture anyway. This is our opportunity to really make the changes we might have been scared to make before, or that we were too busy to implement, right? You have the opportunity now. Every morning at the moment, I'm jumping on with my coaches, and we are doing a morning mindset huddle. And some of the great things that are coming out of that is getting in and going, right, don't want to hear about the doom and gloom, don't want to hear about the negative to start with. What's one thing you can be grateful for today? Right? If we can start with the place of gratefulness, and you can get all of your staff raising their vibration, it's when we're coming from a fake place of fear, our immunity systems are compromised. It is your job as a leader to help raise the vibration of your staff, to protect them, to protect humanity. This is where we have the opportunity to be the ripple effect. It's time to step up. It's time to put your other being busy shit aside, and to really look at how you can lead and how you can be the ripple effect. So it's your duty to every morning be on a huddle with your team, whether you've let them go or not. Right? Okay, I don't care if you've had to let them go. You still have a duty of care to the humans that work for you.
Perfect. And I totally agree. Like, now we need to look after ourselves as leaders and don't beat ourselves up, and be talking about communication and positive communication. John and Jade, John first, what are good examples of how to keep a remote team who is still working? Let's go into the team of which is still working. What's a great way of keeping them motivated and keeping them on track and connected in a remote environment?
Look, I think you can come up with lots of ideas and try things like daily huddles and daily stand-ups, or I've seen some companies start, companies that use Slack or other kinds of social media to start kudos channels and putting things out. I think the most powerful thing you can always do as a leader is ask your team, like, here's what I want to do. I want us to stay connected. I want you to, here's where our business is and here's what we're going to do. What are some ideas that you have that are the best ways to do it, to stay connected and work? And try those things out from the people that work with you or for you. I think that's the simplest way. I think one of the things that happens in these types of situations, and, I've had to lead through, I haven't led through like COVID, but I've led through 9/11 and a bunch of other things, and the 08 and all that kind of stuff. And you do not have to single-handedly come up with all ideas as a leader. And I think lots of leaders tend to, they put themselves in their own little bubble and decide they have to come up with everything to help their team out. And I think you can share that burden. And I think you'll actually be, if you haven't done it, amazed at the energy you get back, the energy of the people, and how much more they'll be bought in. And so just ask
and be a better leader, right? Because you are asking other people to come up with the innovative ideas, the vision, the thought process, like it's about connecting people into it's not done for you. It's like it's done with you, and you are heard and listened to and connected to the environment, correct?
Yeah. And I know I mean, to me, it sounds super simple, and it can seem as generic advice, but it's frequently the most overlooked things I've ever seen leaders do is not to ask for input from the people around them. And I think if you do that, you'll figure out ways to keep your team connected in a way that feels authentic to your company and how you guys run, however you decide to run your business, and feels authentic to the people involved.
Paulina, can I also build on that as well? And I think it's really good point, John. But I think also, guys, what we need to remember that there is life after this. And I think if we stay connected with our teams, if we work through this period together, it will be easier to take off on day one of freedom, so to speak. Because yes, it is tough now, but once it's all finished, and I think that's partially why our government is saying keep your employees, because they want the economy to restart pretty quickly rather than trying to hire somebody again and see if somebody is moved on or somebody checked out mentally and they don't want to do anything with your business. So I think it's extremely important to carry on communicating, because that means you will have a faster start once it's all over.
But this is the opportunity that you can draw on your team, like you said, for the contribution and the ideas. This is where you should be brainstorming. And Paulina and I had a conversation about this on Monday, having a look at the different genius zones that each of your staff have or interests, and ask them, what is it that they would like to contribute? How can we brainstorm? How can you pull apart in this time? Okay, what was our customer journey? What's your input on how we can evolve this? Like, this is an amazing opportunity where we've been forced to slow down, that we can really focus in and innovate and make the changes. So, because this too shall pass, when you come out the other side, you have a new customer journey. You have a new product pathway. You've actually got your SOPs in place. You've done your operational manuals. You managed to get to inbox 0. Like all the things we talk about doing and not doing, this is the opportunity to put the team to work to do it. But this is where they're going to feel the most significance and contribution. If we look at Tony Robbins' 6 human needs, right? Contribution, growth, connection, significance, uncertainty, and variety, and certainty, right? How can we fill them up on their 6 human needs and get them working towards the business? Because coming from if I put my recruiter hat on, you don't want to come out the other side of this and having to be scratching and trying to find staff, because the war for talent will be real. Because even when there's an abundance of people looking for jobs, the top talent gets snapped up fast, and they will be looking and they will have the opportunity to choose who they want to work for. So on a business perspective, you need to think about that too. How do you keep your talent pipeline? How do you proof, like, I don't want to say recession proof your business, because we're in it, but how do you make sure that you are really hitting the ground running when lifted? And it's by doing all the shitty jobs now that you didn't have time to do before.
Absolutely. And Tony, you wanted to jump in as well.
Oh yeah, I was just kind of reiterating that what Jade was just saying, and John himself, about talking to the staff about what is actually the best way to communicate. I've been speaking to some clients and businesses around where some of their people don't want to communicate with them. You know, they don't want a daily huddle. They don't want a stand up every day. They just want to get on and do the job. And there's some task-oriented people rather than people-oriented people that don't want to sit in a room and talk to each other. So it's I guess, from John and Jade's perspective, you know, what's the best way to deal with that? And probably you've alluded to it already about asking them about how they would like to get communicated with. Because as leaders, we have to communicate, and it is part of the job. You know, so does that become a different working from home policy?
I think you need to think about the type of people that are saying that. So maybe they're more of your introverted people. They might be more of your task, but what you need to be careful is they still have the 6 human needs, and they might shy away and hide. But if you're not actually connecting them and keeping them, then the weight of the world will start weighing on them. So you need to find a way that works for them, but you do need to make sure that you're not letting them run away and pull the covers over their head as well.
I think for me, I tend to ask people 3 questions. What do you want to know or need to know? You can use either word. What would be the most effective way for you to learn about it? you know, and you can give people choices. And how frequently do you want to know about it? And I tend to ask people and teams those questions, and then I just deliver back to them kind of what they've asked for. And I think that goes to your point, Tony. I'm not like, you know, I never was the one who wanted to get in the group daily huddles personally. I wanted to come in, crank, and get my stuff done and go. And but I find those 3 questions tend to work, and it tends to at least, it's a good way to deliver what people are asking for, so you don't have to guess and you figure it out. The only other part I would say to you to your specific question is, and it's a little bit to what Jade said, and I'm sure no one would disagree with this statement. You know, I'm a big believer in how you build high trust environments, right? High trust environments are more innovative. People tend to stay with those employers. You tend to not have to pay as much in high trust environments, quite frankly. So despite people not wanting to be in a daily huddle, I think about the things that I need to do to create a high trust environment. You know, what is it I need to communicate, how frequently I need to do it, what are the types of details I need to do it. And I do drive that regardless of whether people want to be in a room or not. I figure out a way to make that happen.
Yeah. And I think it's the problem with the huddles that a lot of the time with those task-oriented people, it's how the huddle is being run. So if it's seen as a waste of their time and it's not getting to the point, then they're not going to want to show up. So it's about tailoring it to suit the team. And maybe you split your teams into your people that, you know, need to vibe off and you know, for Paulina, like us Blaze people over on the right hand side of the quadrant versus the people over on the left, and then you have just a really quick team connection. But it's about tailoring it to your team and to those people, but making sure that we are thinking they won't realize how much the disconnection could affect them long term, especially if they haven't worked remotely before.
And I think you're both right. And looking at the tools that you mentioned too before, John, around the you still be required for the huddles, but things like the WhatsApp and the Snapchats and the Facebook messages, where they don't actually have to be communicating face to face, but they're, you know, throwing GIFs and memes and still communicating with people, throwing that banter around and understanding what's actually everyone else is doing. That's key to set those tools up as well.
Yeah, and you're going to try a few things, and not all of them are going to work.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And it depends on which that depends on the people you have in the room, right? What works and what doesn't work. So I think the biggest, because there is so many different ways and tools we can use, I think the best thing, and this is what we said, every one of us agrees on, is don't do it alone. Ask your team what they need, and, you know, customize, communicate, drive it, but customize it to your team, really. Tony, I'm just going to come back to you, because in a remote working environment, and we are in a digital era, and I know that a lot of us, we understand what Zoom looks like, etc. But what do you think, and the other two can jump in as well, but what do you think are like the 2 easiest tools to set up right now if you wanted to communicate with your team on a daily basis?
Are the 2 easiest tools?
Yeah, I know there's hundreds, but, you know.
Well, look, they're simple and they're easy, and I think it comes back to the questions we're just having: is how do people actually want to communicate? And Gordy's alluded to it as well in terms of the different demographics of your workforce. The millennials, the younger generation, will be more okay with the Snapchats and the WhatsApp and those kind of groups. Obviously, Zoom is a key thing for these huddles, these video conferencing. There's Teams as well, which is the Microsoft product. There's Google Hangouts. So they all have their pros and cons. Zoom, obviously, everyone is on here. You can set that up relatively easy. It's good for 40 minutes with 3 people. It's free. Then you've got to get into some other licensing options. Teams, if you're part of Microsoft and Office 365, it's all included as part of the product suite. And there are variances of the 2. Teams, you can only see 4 people at once. Currently. But Alan, it does have a big red button so you know how to turn it off when the call ends. Whereas Zoom is only the host can stop the meeting. So
you can leave a meeting though, which is also a big red button.
You can leave a meeting at any stage. But I think it's more about how people want to be communicated with, and at what stages during the day. So Teams and Zoom both have the chat and instant messaging. Google Hangouts has the same thing. So it's it is really looking at how do you want your team to be communicated with? How do you want to communicate with with your team? And there's a plethora of ones out there. Jitsi, which is free. So GoToMeeting, a lot of stuff. But of course, predominantly right now is Zoom and Teams. They're the two biggest players. It's like calling Hoover a vacuum cleaner, where it's a vacuum cleaner, but it's the brand. Zoom is, people are saying that in the vernacular, same with I'm going to Google it. Rather than I'm going to search it, I'm going to have a Zoom meeting or a video conference meeting. And people are trying to video conference me rather than having a mobile call. So even a mobile phone call, in the last week, it seems to be this new latest fad. I'm going to Zoom you. Okay, well, you could just mobile phone me. That's fine too.
FaceTime.
But
I have been encouraging people to do, just in general life, doing more video calls, because when you are starting to isolate, getting that human connection, just jumping on a FaceTime, jumping on the WhatsApp video.
Absolutely.
I will answer this. Yeah. You go.
Where go, Pauline?
No, you. I'm sorry. I'm reading the chat, and Peter, I will answer your question after this.
Okay, cool. Because it's good to see what people look like and see that they're still there, and what we've learned in this times of working from home. You get to understand the people, how their office is set up, who their kids or their partners might come into the call and say hi. So it's humanizing that technology element and getting to understand your people more than what you did before you actually, when they just came to the office or came somewhere. You can actually have better conversations, read it in their eyes. And even if you're not on a video conference, some of my guys, they've been absolutely run ragged the last week or so. And they looked absolutely shattered on a Zoom, on a Teams call yesterday. I said, right, you guys are taking a day off because you look shattered. You're not saying anything, but I can see it. So those kind of elements are key, but how we communicate is, and the frequency we communicate in these times, it's got to be done.
Absolutely. So Peter, you asked why we went from Big Blue Button to Zoom. It really there's a couple of things. One is we couldn't quite figure out how to get the link to transcribe into a YouTube. Big Blue Button can't live Zoom into Facebook. And there is a couple of other features, host features, like muting everyone or unmuting everyone. So many more tools. We already were set up on Zoom, so we decided to make that shift. But that's really because we were anticipating 20, 30 people, which we want to manage. When it comes to smaller teams, absolutely want to go and say a Big Blue Button, being New Zealand, being onshore, you want to support them, and it's helpful. But for a live environment where it's a presentation, they just had some technical limitations. That's where it came from. All right.
Sorry, Paulina. Just on that, we're constantly evolving these panel discussions, and so any suggestions or something like that. Taking to John's point, we are not here to pretend we know everything. So have you guys got any other suggestions or ideas of what we can do? Let us know. We're here to support. We're locals supporting locals, so that's what we're here to do. We're not pretending to know everything. So shout out.
Absolutely. Now, John and Jade, quickly back to you guys. We've talked about how to motivate a team and how to communicate with a team who are still working remotely. What do you do as a leader, or how do you communicate with leaders with your team when you've shut down your business and there's actually no work happening? What do you think, like, frequency of communication, etc., should be like?
I don't want to jump in over the top of John, but John, do you want to
go? I think it'll depend on the specific instance. I mean, when you say there's no work, do you think it's going to be a defined period of time? Do you not? I think at the end of the day, my kind of rules for that would be, there's a ton of uncertainty. People don't know what's going on. I would do everything within my power to tell people, hey, we're going dark for the next couple of weeks. There's no work. I would just set up, and I'll check back within you. This is an example. I'll check back with you in 2 weeks' time. And then anything materially changes in those next 2 weeks, I'll do it. So I would just be proactive about checking in, telling people the cadence you'll check in, what you'll do, and if anything material changes, we'll make sure to let them know. I would just be upfront, as candid as possible. Transparency is a hard word, but I'd be candid because sometimes you don't know what's actually going to happen. But I'd be candid with people, and that's what I'd probably end up doing. I see it working for my daughter right now, where we're pretty upfront that it's a restaurant. They are shut. There is nothing to do. Here's what's going to happen. We'll be back at the end of level 4 to tell you what's going on. And that's taking all the angst out of the equation, right? No one's worried about it. They know to wait 4 weeks. Their first paycheck from the wage subsidy showed up last night. And, it kind of works. So candid, transparent, set people's expectations appropriately.
Interesting. So I'm going to go back to Jade because I think Jade might have a slightly different view on this. So I'm loving this already.
Would, so don't you worry.
All right, Jade.
Yeah. So I've got very strong opinions, clearly. I'm all about the human within this, and I'm all about how this is an opportunity for us to reset humanity and be humanity plus, and look at how we can create unity and support each other longer term. We need to think about the mental health of all of the people that are affected by this, not just under our direct, that was on our direct payroll, but our circle of influence. I'm making sure every day I'm just reaching out to friends, reaching out to old colleagues, reaching out to people from my networking group. How are you doing? Are you checking in? Do you need something? What's your mental health like? Here's a mass meditation that we're getting 88,000 people worldwide to jump on. I had to bail on it to jump on here, but to try and unite people, because I think we are the leaders. It is our responsibility to lead the change and be the change. We have so much opportunity right now to reset the earth. The universe has sent us to our room to fucking think about what we've done wrong. This is our opportunity to start making the ripple effects and the change. So I think it's our obligation to show up a little bit more, not only for our staff, but for anyone that's in our community, even if that's just once a week, to say, hey, I'm going to be here. I'm going to open up a call. Do you just need a sanity check? Think about what these people are going through. How else could we support them? If they've been on minimum wage and they're living paycheck to paycheck, they may not have the coping mechanisms that we do as business leaders. How can you support them? What could you do to, run a 30-minute Zoom on how can you do a household budget? Have you even looked at, Paulina and I teach this, but pick up your iPhone, go into your iTunes account and see what things are on auto subscribe and auto renew. Because I got slammed the other day with $1,200 US of a ClickFunnels account that auto renewed that I thought I canceled 9 months ago, right? Lucky I could get it reversed, but other people don't realize how quick or what they can do. I have an Evernote that just had apparently just been renewing every 3 years, for 3 years that I never used. It was from my old business just because I didn't look at it, right? We can teach them tools. How can they share a Spotify account rather than having 2 Spotify accounts in the one household? There's things we can do to support them. Right?
That was me.
That was you, the Paulina the trader. But there's other ways that we can support these people as humans that doesn't need to be work related, right? And to think about because if we do this, we're going to raise humanity together. And I do put a lot of weight on business owners' shoulders, because I strongly believe that the fate of humanity is in the hands of the small business owners, and it's the small business owners that can have the most change and effect. We vote with our wallets and we make change with our mouths. So what are you doing to be the change and to help these people through it?
I'll let John respond before I add my 5 cents worth to this.
I should probably stop drinking coffee now.
Maybe.
I want whatever's in that coffee. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I probably come from a slightly different philosophical perspective. I'm not from that perspective. I grew up outside New York City, so I'm probably a little more cynical. Look at taking care of people as humans. I totally agree. I think the work that we're going to do, mental health is super important. I probably answered the question too narrowly relative to work. I'm trying to figure out how to not make work something that people have to worry about. If you can make it a way for them not to worry about it. But if you know your people and you know they have issues and you know they need help, absolutely should, as a human, you should totally lean in and help people with that. So
nice, I like
disagree.
it.
I agree, because sorry, Paulina, because work is an action and not a place. So we can work wherever we can, but we're still human beings at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So my 5 cents worth to this is, because I work with my team, my business owners quite a bit on this, is in the end, there's 2 ways. One, I'll answer like with John's narrative. The team is still on your payroll, even if you're shutting down, right? Because you're getting the subsidies going in. So how can they upskill or do those 1,001 items they had on their to-do list that they never been able to take off because they never had time? How can they use some of those? And Tony and I spoke about this briefly a while ago, where it was around is your filing system up to date? Is your online or offline? Is your your inbox empty? Are there any inquiries or anything you needed to is there anything where you need tidying up or responding to your old clients? Communicate, ask your team members to reach out to your clients where they
build
can.
relationships with them.
Build relationships with them, right? So they are the pragmatic, you're on the payroll, you can still do things. On the other hand, and I work a lot with tourism, hospitality, that is my jam. They are shut, they can't go and polish the cutlery. That's just not how it's going to work. So what I always recommend is, like Jade said, connect with them on a human basis. How do you train? And we have fundamental courses which are either reasonable or free around your household budget, your cash flow management, your mindset. Do you need to do things around your mindset? There is so many free tools out there where people can connect into. So if you as a leader even give them the options of utilizing some of those tools, you're encouraging them to be focusing on what's ahead rather than sitting in that drama of the news that everything is closed and there will be doom and gloom, because we all going to get frustrated. Even us as leaders who have a much wider perspective on this, we all going to still go and get frustrated and grumpy with the fact that we're isolated and in lockdown. So how can we keep each other motivated? So as leaders, I do think that there is this responsibility to our staff to make sure that if there is nothing going on, at least we're supporting them on the basic needs. Jade, you really want to say something?
No, I was just retouching on what our conversation was on Monday, Paulina, with the hospitality. We're like, how can we, they don't have inboxes to clean, they don't have clients to call. What else could they do? By asking them the question about where did they want to go with their career and their lives and their growth, what else could they do? There might be, the waitress that really wants to learn more about wine so she can step up and be a sommelier. We can reach out to the local alcohol rep and ask them to run a session, just giving some education on how they can upskill in something that's of interest to them. So we can help facilitate their growth, which is only going to serve us better when we come out the other side as well, but it's going to serve them. They might be someone that was in your team that's, studying digital marketing part-time. If they're your bar staff, maybe they could start contributing by doing some of your social media for you, or starting to compile stuff. So if we, and this goes back to John's, ask them, how else would they like to contribute? What's their interest? What could they be doing? Because if you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs at home, you don't want them going down, the rabbit hole of binge watching the friggin' Kardashians or playing Minecraft or some other non-humanity plus bullshit, when you could be helping facilitate. Because you've got to remember that some people, they don't even know what's out there. They don't know what they don't know. So how can we ask them, what do they want in their life? How do they want to grow as a human? And how could we even just point them in the direction or reach out to our network? Because everyone is here to serve at the moment. I'm offering to do free sessions on LinkedIn training if people need to upskill their staff. When they come out the other side, I'm doing 6-phase meditation for people if their staff just need something to uprise them. Everyone I know within my community is I'm here to serve. What do you need? I'll help.
So clearly, Jade is very, very passionate, like all of us. One thing I want, there's a couple of things because I'm looking, and yes, stop drinking the coffee because you on coffee is a challenge for all of us. But what I wanted to say is, you know how Google has this, and John, you might be able to add some detail to this, but do you know how Google has this phase where they allow everyone, I think, a month, a year, where they're working on internal projects they've always wanted to work on and create? Like you have 4 weeks where for some of your team members where you can go and say, now you have the opportunity to tell me how can we pivot, and I know pivot's been thrown around quite a bit at the moment, but how can we pivot our business, or how can we reinvent our business so that we can serve the new customer problems and the new issues which are arising better? And John, I'm gonna
so the famed Google 20%.
20,
gig,
yes,
which is probably a little more PR than it is reality. But
we can
look,
do this now, right?
I don't disagree with your thought. I mean, your capacity to ask people to contribute and do things and work differently, and whether you want to pivot the business or not, I think is all correct. I think the question you have to ask yourself as a business owner is, are you willing to run with the ideas that come from your staff? Right. So, I think if you're willing to do that, I think it's awesome. If it's going to be a bunch of idea generation and you're not comfortable, or you have parameters that you want those teams to work within, I'd be super clear about that, because I think
setting expectations.
I think you have to, because I think when you get people jazzed up and ready to go, and then you shut it all down on them,
totally,
it does not. You never get a second shot at that. Like, it just doesn't work. And so you have to be comfortable with that. And so if you really feel like it's time to pivot your business and you really want to change how you do customer relationships and all that kind of stuff, I think it's an awesome time to go double down on that. And when you give the power to folks, I think you get better ideas. You just got to be willing to run with it and go with it. So that would be my 2 cents. But I totally agree with that. I think you should run that way. Personally, I think you should run that way all the time. I don't think that's just a one-off level 4 lockdown management tip. I think that's just how you should run permanently. But you have to. But
a lot of business owners are scared, right? Because and they've been scared to do this in the past because they don't have enough time, they might not have enough money, they don't know what ideas come out. But now with the removing the thought process of time and money being an issue anyway, I think if you can you need to set, I agree with you, and you need to set 100% clear expectations around what this idea generation will bring, right? And what you are like around, like how big can the projects be, how much money can be invested, etc. Like you have to be clear in your parameters, but then it's such a cool way of getting your team members to work with you, and then be, for you're only paying them 80% or 50% or whatever it comes to. If you get to the other end, they are so much more motivated to stay by you because they want to see those ideas to come to fruition.
Yep, agreed.
All right, Peter, I would like for you to unmute yourself. You've had a question which I need some clarification on to answer. So, Pete,
and I can answer that as well if you wish.
Perfect. Oh, go for it.
So, Peter, do you want to sound out your question just in case people didn't read or?
Yeah, sure. So my question is about how businesses ensure they get paid by other businesses, given the environment we're in, considering some industry sectors are really struggling compared to others, and it could be a cash flow management point of, thing for payment. So how do you ensure you don't get a domino effect in your business to ensure cash flow and invoices get paid on time, and how do you manage that given the current circumstances?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Peter. So I have this I have this speech prepared for all of you guys about how to manage actually ourselves during this time. So troubleshooting basically through the times, and that question actually addressed there, and I'll talk about it now. So one of the most important things during the times like this, and GFC was the same, you've got to watch your customer and you have to assess their behavior, and you have to really do your homework who you work with. Because losing a customer, say you're feeling that something is not right here, or there are obvious signs and red flags and you're just ignoring those. So losing a customer is not as bad as losing a whole business, because if you're not cautious and if you're not smart to do your homework during these times, it could snowball, and people can lose businesses just purely because of that. So I guess it's going back to basics, and make sure that you do have terms of trade, make sure that you pick up the guarantees where applicable for products and stuff. Make sure that your relationship actually solidified in some kind of contract or agreement, and there is a guarantor somewhere on the bottom of the page. And you pick up all the data about the business in the way of their name, their company name, where are they registered company. So doing a little bit of homework, and forget about this lovely trustful environment we used to be in, but be a little bit tough on yourself as well, saying, okay, sale is coming, but I need to do my due diligence, so to speak, and make sure that I'm comfortable with trading with the customer. And sometimes it's just stepping back and say, what industry are they in? How are they going? Have they been paying on time before? Because in some cases, I'm sure everyone familiar, people are lousy payers anyway, even in the past from your previous experience. So that probably will be an indication, okay, for the next service I'm providing, or for the next trade I'm doing with this person, I actually need to maybe ask for money up front, or just have communication going, how they're going and stuff like that. So yeah, exercise your wisdom and knowledge and previous experiences, and just be extra cautious and assess your customer, new or existing.
And I just want to add to this as well, is it's all about communication, right? We will see, unfortunately, we will see a lot of bad debt coming our way over the next little while. There is just no doubt about it. And the question is, do you go, I had this conversation in another group the other day, but it's like, do you go like hard on them and say, I'm going to set you to the debt collector, knowing that you'll be losing this customer? Or are you going to have a conversation with them and say, okay, even though you can't repay it right now, what can you afford repaying? And what are your payment plans and installments? Or if you know that they are normally regular customers who are good in paying, can they save money by you giving them a smaller discount on paying everything upfront bulk, right? So it's really like with your team, where John and Jade and I mentioned before, it's all about communicating with your customer right now and saying, what can you afford? Because you know what, if you have to write off 10, 20, 30K in bad debt, it's better if you get half of it by installments throughout the process than not getting any of it at all.
I think one of the key things is right now is, and to answer Pete's question, is you've probably already done the work for them now and you've invoiced for them and they're not paying it. It's the coming weeks and months that are going to be a struggle when you don't have the clients, you don't have the work. But that's a topic for another another panel session.
Yes.
Peter, you said businesses paying businesses. So can you just tell me what type of businesses are they?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
So we're in the media business. We publish the region's only 100% content platform called Bay of Plenty Business News. Most of our debt has been, pretty good so far, but we're still publishing monthly and we continue to do so. But we've got to be kind of, I guess, more mindful now more than ever to say, okay, well, what industries are going to be high risk for us to take credit on? Do we say to those, companies that want to advertise to get things going, we'll do a payment plan, or we do 50% up front, or we give you a 20% or 10% discount if you pay within 7 days, or that type of stuff, where in the past we'd never had to do that. Because we don't want to be in a situation where we provide all the services, we incur all the costs, we go to print, we distribute, and then we can't get the money. And so my concern is, like, in some businesses, tourism's obviously one of them, construction could be another, they'll be holding onto their cash at the moment. What's the best way of of managing that conversation, given that everyone's in a crisis at the moment, but also, you know, working through to help other businesses without being, you know, too hardcore about it, so to speak.
Yeah.
So how to do that?
I had a similar situation when I was running recruitment firms through the GFC, and we did do a risk analysis on the different industry types and the cash flow, and we redid our pricing structure. It actually really stabilized our cash flow for the future by moving to a retainer model, and for some of them it would be delayed payment, delayed gratification, to keep the same amount, which what meant it was drip fed, or if you, and I saw this because I recruited a lot for media companies during that time as well, that were having a similar challenge, lots of local papers and things where they were taking parts of the campaign if they could figure out what was generated from the campaign on the back end. So getting really creative about the pricing structure and how you can make sure you get paid enough to keep going, but maybe you delay your gratification as well. 100% though, for us with recouping the cash was about that communication, because if you're not in communication or you're an asshole, you're going to be on the bottom of the list. Whereas if you're humanizing and you're touching base and you're asking how they're going, you move to the top of the list. Like when I was going through it, and, you know, I had like hundreds of thousands of dollars that I was owed, and I had hundreds of thousands of dollars that I needed to pay, I made sure that I paid the little guys first, and the guys that I knew that were going to support me and that were going to help me get out of it before anyone else. Right. Yeah. And so to ease their burden, like we were running like, I don't know, $16,000, $18,000 bills with Seek at the time, and all the job boards, they were the last to get paid. But we made sure that we communicated with them, because we told them if we couldn't keep operating, we couldn't pay them ever.
Yeah, that's right.
So they cut us some slack.
For a second, jump in here. We have about a couple of minutes before our hour is up. Now, we are happy to stay on because there's a COVID-19 update to be going as well, but I just wanted to let everyone know that we are running over time. So thank you for those who have to go.
Thank you, Jade.
For those for staying.
Welcome, Peter.
But feel free to continue staying here while we have this conversation. And John, you've been unmuting yourself a couple of times, so I think you've got something to say.
No, I've just seen a couple people I work with done a nice job interrupting the automated zero invoice due emails, and they're now sending personal emails out to everybody. And so they've done a nice job. And that does get, I mean, even if I owe somebody, it gets a lot more reactive. The automated zero emails, like I'm so used to them, you zoom out of them. You just know they're due in 20 days and you ignore them for a while. But the personal emails from someone that you know in the business tends to get more of a reaction, and that's a thing I've seen a couple companies that I deal with do really quite successfully. The other thing too, I don't know, I went in 2008. The biggest thing too is also just making sure you've scrubbed all your discretionary costs as aggressively as possible, because you will have issues with people paying, and so you want to make sure your cost structure is as clean as it can be. To give you as much flexibility as possible.
Yeah. So the challenge I said to my customers is, and this hasn't come from me, but I really like the idea, and I've been working with that in the past as well while preparing for a session, is how do you drop your expenses by say 40% while increasing your revenue? So right now we are really looking into, for a lot of us, the revenue has just simply stopped. So how do we recreate, or what offering can we offer to get revenue back in, and how can you drop expenses without dropping value? Because I think that's a big one. Like a lot of us go, okay, we're going to cut out on the sales guy, and we're going to cut out on the production line, and we're going to cut out, but they are the ones who are actually creating the value for you. So how do you cut expenses without losing your value? So you need to keep your value as high as possible, but still be able to cut your costs. And that is a challenge only you can look at in your, well, with, you know, your business consultant or your accountant, where you really look into the value of your P&L and say, okay, what of those costs are really necessary for us to continue providing value, and which ones can we cut?
Yeah, and that's where the value of cash flows and income projections comes to play. You have to make sure that you get your figures. You have to be on the top, and John was talking about zero, and zero actually just brilliant in that respect, because you can actually have a snapshot of what's going on with your accounts on a daily basis. And that's more than ever very important to review what is actually happening with your business on a daily basis, how much sales you give, how many sales you've done, and review your expenditure very closely. And yeah, again, there are different tools we could be talking about, interest rates, and that actually kind of brings us to commercial rents as well. But I'll let Paulina to lead us
so thank you for Jade and John. Feel free to stay on if you have more time, but we're going to go into the COVID-19 now. So there has been some significant questions we have been raised, and one big debate over the last week with all the forums I've been to is landlords versus tenants. It seems like there is two different fights here, and I know Tony has a view on this as well, but give us an update, Valerie, on what the landlord situation looks like.
Yeah, so again, government announced on 23rd of March that they've changed the law around, so now all the rents are frozen, so there is no rent increase allowed, and there is no deadline to this from what I can see. And also there is a protection against tenancy terminations. So basically meaning that landlords cannot kick out anyone. And also I was reading questions and answers later on in the explanation notes, and it says that things like landlord cannot go to the tenant's premises whether the situation where, say, for example, somebody was going to move house in the next couple of weeks, so that's not going to happen. But the main thing is the only direction from government is that all the rents are now frozen and there is no terminations. And from what I can hear from different people and what we've done personally, we actually went to our tenants ourselves, it's residential tenancy we're talking, and we decreased their rents by about 20%, and they were eternally thankful actually. But I think it doesn't mean that we're swimming in money, but we thought we need to do something for our tenants to make sure that they can actually pay us the rent, because there is a point of that longevity, right? So and it's what Jade was saying about if you're an asshole, no one will be working for you. So there's something with landlord versus or with tenant relationship. We felt that if we give them that discount, we've got better chance that on the other side they will stay with us and they will pay full rents once it's all back to normal. That's kind of the only direction we've got from the government, but it would be interesting even from the panel to hear what are your thoughts on that as well, and if you've heard anyone doing anything about it.
So absolutely, thank you, Valerie. I'll just jump in here. For me, it's been really interesting because people have this boohoo landlords. The landlords should be doing this and the landlords should be doing that, and they should be dropping our revenue. When we think about landlords, we're thinking about someone who is physically owning a property. We're not thinking about them that they are also business owners, that this is their livelihood and this is their income, that they have families, that they have, right? So again, going back to the human connection around how you approach your landlord and the expectations you have of your landlord, because they are in the same boat as us. And Tony, I would like to invite you to share a little bit, because you're a tenant and a landlord, right?
I am, and it boils down to the communication side of things. And you know, I've had some my tenants come to me saying we want rent relief. That's been their request. That's either a yes or no question, and invariably from a landlord, that's just going to be why no, got bills to pay, you're still operating, blah 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 blah. Conversely, if it was, look, we're going through tough times, want rent relief, I'm going to pay 50% now, can we do OPEX? And over the next 6 months, we're going to recover it, bam, 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 bam. What you then get into is the negotiation stage. So it's just talking about it in negotiation and thinking about, as Paulina mentioned, people. You know, we understand you're running a business, this is your livelihood. How would you create your suppliers? How would you look at your customers? If you've got to pay other people what's the negotiation point? And I noticed Joe's mentioned some things here. Joe being commercial real estate broker and leasing agent for Bailey's. I don't know if you want to jump in on any of these comments, Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me on, guys. It's great to be part of this. And it's very interesting times for us all in our market as well. We're seeing quite a lot of tenant and landlord discussions happening fairly robust and quite quickly regarding where they sit with this rent relief or exiting their leases in some cases. But what I have known and what I have seen working well from the last GFC that we went through was the landlords that could and did communicate with their tenants and came to it doesn't always be a win-win situation, but it's a compromise, were the ones that kept their businesses, kept their tenants happy, kept them there, and so they survived. Whereas you get a lot of greed happening in the market where some of the landlords take a quite harsh approach, and then they'll lose their businesses altogether, or their tenants, sorry, altogether. But I have been inundated with calls, and some of them are taking quite different stances. Some of them want to help, and then some of them are just like, no, this is our business, this is our income, and we're not moving. I think that's a very staunch attitude, and it's not going to be productive for anybody. So we are hearing some solicitors have put out some potential opinions regarding how a portion of the abatement might look, depending on your business type. They say for retail, for example, they are going to be dramatically affected by they can't have people come into the store. So yes, their rent might reduce according to that. But at the end of the day, businesses are still storing product. They're still being able to work remotely. So in some cases, businesses still can carry on, if not maybe from that exact location, they are still able to function in some capacity. And I think tenants have got to be wary that they're not asking for 100% rent reduction. It's got to be all relative on a case-by-case basis.
And that comes back to the question Peter asked before about how do businesses pay businesses and how do you manage your cash flow, right? You need to remember that a landlord also has cash flow to manage. They also have a business, they also have suppliers, and it has a knock-on effect. So us going out there demanding is not going to get us anywhere. As soon it's like, if you know, it's the same thing with our customers. Say we are not landlords, we are other businesses, and our customers come demanding, like Jade said, they are at the bottom of the list, and the answer is always no, and you need to pay on time. While if you go in and say, well, we are all in it together, let's find a solution together, people will be much more open to it. And I try not to swear in a public space, but I'm just going to apply what we call the dickhead policy, right? Like there is things like dickheads in the world. Excuse me, please do not quote me on this, Peter. But like, you know, like there is those people where you're never ever going to be able to please, and they're going to have this hatch, and they're going to be greedy, and they will long-term burn, right? While it's the people who are like really humanly focused on how can we get the best results together, which will get the best thing, right?
You also got to bear in mind that what is the future of work going to look like if everyone is walking around working from home? Commercial space, what does that look like from a landlord and a tenant? Where you need all the space that you need. What the landlord's got to be aware of that. Right now, though, when negotiating in terms of rent, is, well, you can't you're probably not going to go anywhere else, and the landlord is going to get another tenant. So it's kind of that compromise of at least for the short term.
Which brings us to the next subject, Valerie, mortgage holidays. Because, you know, landlords, there is a lot of talk, and, you know, people go, they've moved the word holiday out of it and go mortgage deferment plan. Deferrals, but people go, woo, holiday, I want 6 months of not paying. Tell us what's the implication of actually taking one of those deferral plans.
Well, I want to point out, normally when you come back from holidays, you have to go back to work, right? And you normally have a large bill to pay as well. So it's pretty much the same. So the official wording is a 6 months mortgage holiday for people whose income have been affected by COVID-19. So, and that's purely, again, our lovely government putting people in the center and saying that we don't want you to go homeless. We don't want any mortgagee sales, but it's not going to be, again, free for all. So what will happen for this 6 months, the principal is going to stay the same of your mortgage, but the interest will still occur and it still accumulate, and then it will be added to your mortgage at the end of it. So there was a calculation on $500,000 mortgage, which in Tauranga, no one's got that small mortgage anymore. It will be about $16,000 added at the end of it. But overall, what we need to know that banks are operating on case-by-case basis. I have heard that apparently applications are processed pretty quickly, so there is a fast track for sure. They are, again, so it's all on case by case, and the main thing to remember here, that it's just a break from payment, but it's not elimination of that payment altogether. Okay, so it just it means that you'll take a bit longer in the end to repay that mortgage. Also, different financiers and different great minds suggesting use it as a last resort if you really are facing serious consequences of COVID-19. But if you think that you might get by, and if you think that you might actually carry on and do your repayments as usual on your mortgage, then carry on as usual. And also, it doesn't have to be 6 months. I understand that there could be a 2 months term, it could be a 3 months term, which in reality probably not a bad thing to have, because again, coming back to cash flow, hopefully in 2-3 months things will settle and we'll come back to some kind of normality in our business operations. So having 2 months break on your repayments may be not a bad idea. So I guess my advice, don't get excited and go for whole 6 months. Go steady, and it's all about eliminating all the expenditure out of our life, which is unnecessarily, and just focus on what's important. And of course, roof above the head is probably number one on all counts. So that's kind of where we're at with that one.
Especially, I love like when you said, you know, and I've never thought about it this way. You went on a holiday and then you have a big bill to pay in the end, right? And that's exactly what's going to happen here. You go on a holiday and you go, ooh, this is great. But you have, on the, like you said, $500,000, you get a $16,000 extra bill on this. And that adds, you know, 3, 4, 5 years to your mortgage. So is it really something you need? And every one of us has to figure out what is our essentials. That's not something, there is no right or wrong about this, but everyone will have to figure out, is the mortgage repayment right now an essential, or do I really need that? Do I need that deferral? Because otherwise you're just going to add more trouble later on, right?
It's when you think about it, like those cards that you get that are 12 months interest free and you can do your deferred payment. If you wait the whole 12 months with the deferred payment, at the end of it, you're going to be slapped with 32%, right? So yes, have it there as a reprieve, but making sure that you're still contributing, even if you take that reprieve, if you can still contribute a little bit, it's going to make it better for you in the long run. So it's just 100%. Being smart. It's just that, yeah, I think there's too many people throwing it around thinking it's going to be a real holiday. Holidays are expensive.
Yeah, agreed.
That was a really good analogy. I liked it. Yeah. And now a couple of really boring, well, actually very exciting stuff for me. I did say, because for me it's really exciting as well, but I don't know if you guys all know April Fool's Day today, which means we've just finished our financial year. So if you guys were all in the middle of the stress of going, oh my God, what am I going to do with myself? How am I going to pay the staff? Surprise, your financial year is just finished. So there is a few things Valerie really wanted to point out to us, because it is really important that we are not only thinking about the the situation we're in about COVID-19, but the two, what did we laugh about? The two definite things in life are taxes and death. So tell us about the taxes. What's going on?
So I'm going to talk about very exciting stuff, not so much. Okay, so just a quick reminder, of course. So RD is issuing a lot of reminders to tax agents like myself saying, please tell to your clients not to forget to file the tax returns on time. And for New Zealand, I know Jade is not in New Zealand right now, but there is that. So we've got PAYE, payroll, please file on time. That's kind of coming from the ID. This one was the GST return. The nearest GST return is 7th of May, which is ages from now, but still just remember that needs to be done. The tax payment that's coming up is 7th of April. That will be your terminal tax for 2019, if everyone's got still to pay something like that. Now, RD is saying that they will write off any penalties and interest from businesses unable to pay their taxes on time due to the impact of COVID-19. And I'm reading it off the guide. So again, it's not going to happen automatically. You will have to talk to your accountant. You have to make sure that somebody is representing you there for the RD. And but if you're not able, so there are different ways to do it, obviously. You can enter an installment arrangement, or you can just delay and pay by yourself, but in a later date. And also there is a tool called Tax Management New Zealand where you can actually purchase the tax at low interest rate. So it's probably on case by case, but I'm just saying that there are ways to pay your tax, not directly to the ID, but with a little bit of a delay. And if you have, again, an accountant, they will negotiate that write-off of penalties and interest. Another thing I wanted to, sorry?
I think the one thing to add to this is be proactive about it. So if you have tax bills coming your way and you can't pay them, don't wait until you're past and then argue that there's a write-off. Go and connect with your accountant or the IID and say, I will not be able to pay, and set it up beforehand, because it's going to be so much easier and so much less headache for you to set it up beforehand than afterwards.
Yeah, also along the side of making payments if something is due to pay. Apparently they're saying that the Westpac branches will be open 1 day per week during the lockdown. So I'm not sure if anyone is interested to rush the Westpac, but I thought it was interesting that they've negotiated 1 day of bank being physically open, because remind you, there is a whole army of people over 70 who's not online. So I guess that's designed for that group of people who actually need to pay taxes or do something with the bank. And of course, they're not on computers. And another thing just to bring to your attention, whoever is going to file their tax returns or communicate with the ID in April. So ID is going through transformation. It's been happening for the last 3 years. And this year is year 3. And next year we'll have another one. So the ID will be shut from 9th of April, and they call it Easter shutdown. So it will be shut from 9th of April till 16th of April, and there would be no phone lines or no My IR available. And why I'm bringing it to your attention, just in case if you're trying to do something good like GST return and nothing is working, that's because ID is shut down, but I'm sure there will be some warnings. So if you really want to sort out something in April tax-wise, do it before 9th of April or come back to it after 16th. And the last thing, I guess, yeah, and just the last thing, just to the wage subsidy, I think I haven't mentioned that when that amount or the wages are accounted for the employees, make sure you deduct taxes just as the same. So there is KiwiSaver there, and there is everything is PAYE, just normal child support, or if there are payments to deduct. So everything should be just the same as before. And that's again from the ID, just use the subsidy as a cash flow top up, but on the employee side of things, it should be exactly the same. And of course, there are a few measures which I touched on about the depreciation and commercial building depreciation. So that's now released as well. And prof techs are changing, but we'll touch on it later when we're a little bit further into the year.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Now we'll do one last round of questions. Does anyone have any questions around the subject we've been sharing, and anything we haven't touched on right now?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a quick question.
Cool.
Just wanted to get everyone's thoughts on changing your terms of business in this environment. Should we be actually recrafting our terms of business in terms of you know, doing work for other people in relation to payment, invoicing, discount structures and things like that?
Okay, I have a really strong view on this, so I would love to start if I may. Of course, you have to look at your new structure. If you have a product, especially if it's not an essential product, people will probably not be able to pay you what you had in the past on this. However, I have a really, really strong issue with people giving out things for free. Suddenly, everyone's jumping online, giving free workouts and free this and a free that. That's not going to feed your family, and that's not going to pay your bills. So my view on this is that you will have to look at your pricing structure and see, is it still affordable in this environment like you would normally do. But I would caution to do a value exchange or give things out for free just because, right? So it comes down to a little bit to the customer pathway around how do you attract your customers and how do you communicate with your customers. But remember the fact that you had loyal customers the whole time who have paid top premium dollar. If you throw out and say, I'm going to do all of this for free, how are they going to feel? And how are they ever going to come back to you? That is my view on this. Tony or Valerie or John,
Yeah,
if you're still out.
I'll be happy to put my 2 cents. So I think it's extremely important to stay profitable during this time, because again, you don't want to kill off your business. So if you think that a little discount is appropriate, I would run with that, but I definitely won't suggest trading yourself into negative. So, and that's coming back again to the accountancy side of things. Looking at your cash flow, what income is anticipated, what are the expenses, and make sure that there are margins still to cover your expenditure, because it's no good for anyone if you will be very generous with your terms, but then again, all of a sudden you're at loss situation and you have to shut the door and let all the people go. So yeah, keeping an eye on the figures, and yeah, being cautious about how you approach it, because you've got a business to run as well.
Tony.
Yeah, look, I think it's, and know where you're coming from, Peter. It's a complete pivot on, you're not pivoting your business actual services or your product. It's about how people are paying for it. So you know, it's just a matter of looking at different ways. What does that mean? Does more customers with less money equal the same? I think John was alluding to that before around keeping your costs lean. What can you get out of the business? And in this time, is it just a matter of breaking even to keep the doors afloat, versus, you know, hey, if you're making a 30% margin, is it down to 20, whatever that is going to work? And segmentating the clients, what's going to work, what's good. Does you go from a user pays model to a subscription to a membership, or, you know, and for you guys, for example, you know, do you take an annual, a 6-month quarterly, and you get it in every month, but you just spread those costs over annually, versus what your costs are going to be. So it's just, you know, looking at the whole business model. John, have you got anything you can probably add to that?
No, I guess my only thing is it's just what problem are you trying to solve for, right? Yep. Are you trying to solve for today and the current issue, or is this something you've been thinking about for some period of time and you're deciding that you want to change?
I think for us, it's just, you know, how do we move from lockdown to I guess the rebuild phase, like most businesses are going to be doing as we come out of the 3-week period. Hopefully, that's if we do come out of the lockdown on time, and how to adjust our business model to not change the value equation, but also to be realistic in relation to, you know, keeping profitable, keeping the revenue and cash flows going, and adjusting to meet the market really, because, you know, we've had the same rates in our media properties for the last 3 years. We haven't changed them because we entered the market in 2016. We're in 2020. You know, but we've also got to be realistic about, well, you know, a lot of businesses will have the mindset of cutting marketing budgets in a situation like this. Some businesses will view marketing as a discretionary spend that can be cut. So how do we, you know, meet the market and ensure that our terms of business reflect that? And that could be a number of things. It could be things like you pay within 7 days, we'll give you a 20% discount, or you do a payment plan, as Tony alluded to, or you know, we do a 50% up front if the businesses that we've never worked with before, and 50% on completion. So we're trying to work at ways that is going to be really realistic given the situation.
I also think you should add to this, what value can you add to the product you already have? So you might, you know, it might be things like you can advertise with us, but, and I'm sure you're doing some of the stuff already, but really looking at it like, okay, can you add a feature on editorial where you can share about who is that person so that they get more out of it than just a little ad? Or can you do, you know, create like a on your Facebook page or whatever marketing you apply, that they get an interview or a live, or what are the additional benefits you can give to your marketing tools? Because even though people would have reduced their market spend, they're going to look for their best ROI. So how can your package give that ROI on your marketing?
Good point. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're looking at added value services such as, you know, copywriting, content creation, rather than just selling space. You know, all those services that would go with that.
Yep. And I think I've alluded to before in the chats, guys, that we'll probably do a marketing and coming out of this in a couple of weeks in this panel around, you know, because as John alluded to before, this is a good opportunity to double down on some stuff.
Yeah.
I my only 2 cents in what you're talking about, Peter, is that I think, go ahead, I think what your customers wanted pre-shutdown versus post-shutdown is still the same thing.
Yeah.
I just think there's a smaller pie to go after. Right? Like, and so I just think that means you just have to be that much sharper. Yeah. But I think what people want is going to be the same, right? And to your point, you do see some of these social media agencies that we have here in town that do a good job on copy. They do a good job on video. They do a really good job on multi-platform distribution. And so I would really get into try to really just work backwards from your customer. I think those things are still the same, personally.
Thanks, John. That's good. Yeah.
I think next week we might have a subject around how to pivot your business or something like that, or how to think in different ways. Let us bounce around. Peter, if you have any more questions, keep them in the Facebook group. We're all very active live all the time, so we'll be able to answer those. And I think we have some work to do around the next subject.
Can I just one idea I had? Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
I just had this idea. I think it's a really interesting time, especially in your space, for partnerships.
Yeah, collaboration.
I think it's a really interesting time for partnerships, to especially locally here in town. I think there's some unique things that could probably be done.
And sorry, if I can just add one thing, just in regards to your marketing too, with the media, I think, yes, we might lose some businesses advertising in that space, but for everything we lose, we're going to have businesses out there that are going to actually want to go tenfold in how they advertise and the amount of space they advertise. I mean, for us in the real estate game, for example, we are going to be massively advertising space. So those smaller businesses, the ones that are affected that we lose, I think Peter, you're going to gain tenfold.
Yeah. Yeah, there is some categories that are certainly coming out in terms of this crisis. So obviously supermarkets are doing very well. I would say tech firms are doing quite well as well. You know, there's a real good opportunity there, Tony, maybe.
Well, it's fine now, but in a couple of weeks, now that's going to be the test, and when people are settled at home and what's actually happening. So busy now, but we are. You know, this is probably going to be a longer than a 4-week thing. So we'll see. Yeah,
and
we're doing some strategies around that.
Briefly on the collaboration, John, so you're 100% correct. Like, I've been trying to collaborate with a lot of businesses in Tauranga who see you rather as a competitor than a collaborator or partner, and I think we will see the new word pivot in that there will be many more people connecting with each other and saying, okay, how can we do better things together? Well, at least I'm hoping, that might be my hope, might be naive, but I'm hoping that we will move into a much bigger model where it's like, actually, if we're in it for ourselves, we're going to get a slice of the pie. If we are joining together, we're going to have a bigger slice of the pie, and we're all going to live happier and better. Right? That's my thought process on this. All right. We've gone way over 90 minutes. Thank you for those who have stayed on and for asking the questions. We will be back next week with a new panel, with new ideas and thought processes. Feel free to connect with us. John and Jade, even though Jade's left, but I'm sure she'll hear the recording. John, thank you so much for coming and joining us and giving us your time. And, we really appreciate your input from the big world out there, right smack bang into little tiny Tauranga. And I wish you guys all a happy week. Don't get too stir crazy, and we will see you on the other side next Wednesday. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See ya.